Good afternoon, good morning, Nathan Nation. We'll be getting started just shortly. Thank you for joining us today. Give us a couple more minutes and then we'll get kick-started. All right, looks like we're at the top of the hour. So welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Elena Philo. I am the Vice President of Professional Development here at NAFA. We are very excited to partner with both LIMRA and Life Happens to support the Help Protect Our Families campaign and provide a more in-depth look at the 2021 Insurance Barometer study. Before we get started, just a few housekeeping notes for everyone here. All participants are going to stay in listen-only mode. However, it's a lot of information, so if you do have questions throughout, please feel free to use at the very bottom the Q&A function. If we have time at the end of this presentation, we will do our best to get through all your questions. But I want to be brief on my comments and get us over into the actual program itself. So joining me today, we have Maggie Leyes, the Chief Creative Officer at Life Happens. Life Happens both educates consumers and creates marketing resources for agents and advisors to reach those consumers about the importance of life insurance. She has been in the industry for 20 years, with 8 of those years actually here with NAFA as managing editor of our Advisor Today magazine. So welcome, Maggie. Thank you for being with us. Also with us today is Allison Salka, PhD. Allison is the Senior Vice President and Director of Member Benefits Research for LIMRA Loma and Secure Retirement Institute. Allison joined LIMRA in 2012 and is responsible for driving the strategy and direction of its global research program. She oversees a team of more than 85 professionals in LIMRA's member benefits and research division who conduct the benchmark studies, discovery research, and thought leadership designed to help companies better understand industry issues and trends. Allison previously led the retirement research and competitive intelligence team at Prudential and was also a director of retirement research and business analytics at MassMutual. She has a master's degree from the College of William and Mary and a PhD from Vanderbilt University. And with that, Allison, it's my pleasure to turn things over to you.
Thanks very much, Elena. I'm very happy to be here and talk today about the life insurance need gap. I think in so many ways, it's been a really interesting year, not just because of COVID-19 and all that, but because you had the 7 different industry organizations get together around a common purpose. And that's making sure that people who know they have a need for life insurance are able to get the coverage that they need. And I think this has been really a watershed year. And the objective that I wanted to do with my section of today's presentation is really provide some information about the opportunity that is out there based on some research we've done with Life Happens, and then provide some information, strategies, and resources that are actually going to help close the life insurance gap. Because again, this has been a challenge that we've faced for years, and we really have a historic opportunity. So how are we going to do that, or how to kind of meet these objectives? Talking about the opportunity in terms of the Barometer study. And so the Barometer study is a study we have been doing since 2011 with Life Happens. And we surveyed over 3,000 individuals who told us about their perceptions, attitudes, and behavior related to things like life insurance, financial concerns, why they buy, why they don't. And again, we want to be able to share some of this information with you so you'll understand what is the opportunity related to sales, and then how can you execute or take advantage of that opportunity to help provide people with the coverage that they want and that they need. And so with that, I just want to start off with a fact that probably won't surprise a lot of you in this audience. But, as part of the study, we asked people, how soon would you face financial hardship after the death of the primary breadwinner in the family? And for almost half of them, they said they would face financial hardship within 6 months. And for 1 out of 4, it would be within 1 month. So I don't think anybody would try and deny that there is a need. And I don't think anybody, given sort of the volatility and the economic turmoil that we faced in the last year, would say, that there's not a need out there. again, I think there is a growing recognition of the need. But as we're looking at the need, we probably want to start by understanding life insurance ownership by type. So we're going back to 2011 and tracking ownership, either individual or group. So who owns life insurance? What percent of the population owns life insurance? And so we know that from a high of 63 in 2011, now 52% of the US population owns some type of life insurance, again, whether it's individual or group. And we know that, so that's 52% of the population, which represents 134 million adults. So, hey, great for those 134 million adults, but that also means there are 124 million adults who do not own life insurance. So what we do to understand the market opportunity is look at the gap between those who own and those who do not own, or excuse me, those who say they need insurance and those who actually own it. You know, really complicated math here. 70% of people say they need life insurance, right? But only 52% of people actually own it. So that creates a gap of 18 percentage points. But what does that mean? Again, if we're going to do the complicated math, 59% of people who did not own life insurance said they need it. That represents 73 million people. 22% of owners said they need more insurance. So that's an additional 29 million people. So if you put those two together, that's 102 million people who are either uninsured or underinsured. So the question is, you know, who are these people? So if you're looking to target them and to understand, you know, where to find them, what their needs are, that's why we did this research, the Barometer research. And so again, wanted to share some insights so you'll get a better sense of, you know, who's looking for insurance and how can you get them the coverage that they need. So what has been the impact of COVID? And I know, you know, most of us are probably tired of hearing about COVID at this point. You know, and if I had a nickel for every time I've talked about it, I wouldn't need any life insurance or savings. But I still think it's important to note that almost a third of consumers said they were more likely to buy life insurance because of the pandemic. And what LIMRA does quarterly since before the pandemic, we asked people about their likelihood to buy. And we noticed that more people were saying they were likely to buy. So we actually were able to test this hypothesis with the Barometer study, and people explicitly said it was because of the pandemic. But then if you look at, you know, who within, like, are there different segments within the US where you have people who are more likely to say than in the past, they're likely to buy insurance? And millennials, right? I think millennials, again, a lot of them are starting off their careers or lives, their married lives, or having children. And I think a lot of them were able to either put off thinking about life insurance, but a pandemic gave millennials a lot more time to think about that, likely, than they've had in the past. Another thing that I want to point out is that people who tested positive for COVID were more likely to say they were going to buy insurance. So again, remember, 31% of people said, yes, I'm more likely to buy. But for those who had COVID, it was 42%. And so this is a group of people who will likely be very receptive to information about life insurance and the benefits that it provides. And not surprisingly, those with higher levels of assets were more likely to say that, you know, the pandemic made them more likely to buy life insurance. And it might have been, again, because of economic volatility, made them aware of certain vulnerabilities that they had. And then for Black Americans and Hispanic Americans, two demographics that were disproportionately hit by the pandemic, it also made them much more likely to buy than the average person, or more likely to say the pandemic has had an influence. So understand that COVID really uncovered or revealed some opportunities among these demographics. But again, awareness of the need for something is really the first step, right? You need to go from awareness to action. I need to do something. I need to actually yeah, do something so that I can close this gap. So what moves people to action? And we've done consumer surveys where, as opposed to things being really high tech, it's information received through the mail was the most common reason people said they were moved to buy life insurance. And the second is a call or a visit from a financial professional. And so when the pandemic hit and so many agents and advisors were able to move to, having phone calls or doing Zooms or WebExes or things, again, it's that contact. And again, mail, which is not a particularly high tech form of contact, is still very effective. And conversations with friends, colleagues, or relatives. These are not things that are a surprise, or they shouldn't be a surprise to anybody. But again, I think this is proof that they are still really important. And we also we did some modeling to look at what are the characteristics that matter most. If you are trying to come up with a model and assign probabilities to the people who are most likely to buy insurance, these are the people that you would find, or that would be highest on the list. Those who have high assets. So anything in green is the more that they have this characteristic, or if they have this characteristic, the more likely they are to buy life insurance. So generally, people with higher assets, people with higher debts, people with higher household income, people who work with an advisor or an agent, people who have children, are employed, are married, have experienced a recent life event in the last 2 years. And actually, on the subject of recent life events, one that I think is really interesting that we found is actually positively correlated with buying insurance is the loss of a job. So people may not buy life insurance right away after they lose a job, but it's actually a pretty significant predictor of life insurance purchase behavior. And that's usually within 2 years of this life event. And that originally we were looking at that result and saying that's really odd. But our hypothesis is that people who've lost their job understand the importance of their income and having a continuity of income. So they're actually more receptive for that reason. We also know that people with higher levels of education and those who say they make financial decisions for their household are more likely to buy. And we know age, actually, the reason it's red is because as people age, they are a little bit less likely to buy. But if you want to know, again, we spend a lot of time, I have a research team and we're all kind of nerdy. So we try and run models that can predict how likely a person is to buy life insurance. And I wanted to share that in any given year, in the population, about 7% of people are likely to buy life insurance. But if you look at different people and you find young, middle-aged, upper middle class, high income, high debt, working, and meet all of these characteristics on the side, their likelihood to buy insurance is actually over half. So they are much more likely. So understanding who are the best prospects and getting to them with the right messages are really important. And Maggie's going to be talking about some of those messages and some of the tools to reach them in a minute. But I'd also like to talk about specific segments. Again, the Barometer study looks at different segments. And here you can see by gender and generation who, if 52% is the average, national average of life insurance ownership, this slide looks at who has more or less. But it really is a little bit deceiving, right? Because you would look at this and say, well, men don't need insurance because they're more than the average. But if you look at, because we surveyed these people, if you look at who says I actually have insurance, but I need more, or I don't have insurance, but I need it, we find that almost a third of women who don't have insurance said, I need it, I get it, I need it. And 1 in 10 who already has it says, I need more. So again, just looking at characteristics of what percent or what proportion of people own stuff, isn't good enough. Because again, if you looked at people by generation, you would say, well, Gen Z is a little bit below average, but fully 43% of Gen Z who does not have insurance, they don't own, are saying, I need it and I know I need it. Same thing, over a third of millennials said who don't have it are saying that they need it. And for Gen X and even baby boomers, you have significant proportions of them, 15% and 13% respectively, who need to buy more. And I think that's where a lot of the opportunity is too, because for people who already own life insurance, they're more sort of low hanging fruit in terms that they already understand the need for life insurance. If we look by race and ethnicity, again, for example, you would say, wow, Black Americans are more likely to own than the national average. But again, if you look, you would see that almost a third of those who don't own recognize the need, and same thing with Hispanic Americans. So there's an opportunity right there. And then again, about 15% who already own in those categories want more coverage or recognize that they need more coverage. Same thing with those who make under $50,000. There's a broad recognition among those people that they still need to have their incomes covered. So the question is, again, how to get in front of them, how to make it easy for them, because a lot of these people, don't understand all of the products, or they're busy, or they get nervous for a lot of different reasons. And we've got some research that talks to that. But again, you want to get in front of these people and tell them about the opportunity, because absolutely the opportunity is there. And so I wanted to share some information about first-time buyers. So we were tracking people who said they bought life insurance for the first time in 2020. And so if you look and you can see, well, it was millennials made up, the highest proportion of millennials said I made this purchase for the first time, followed by Black Americans. So you're getting people who are buying for the first time. And LIMRA also tracks sales of life insurance. And so we do a quarterly sales survey for, I guess it's over 90 life insurance carriers. And so we're trying to track sales over time. And in 2020, so in 2020, sales increased 2% for the year. So that's despite the pandemic, despite everything that happened. And that was driven by strong whole life and term sales, right? But I think something even more impressive or more interesting is that total individual life insurance policy sales increased 11% versus Q1 2020. And this is the highest growth in policy sales since 1983. And just as a quick reminder, in 1983, I think Flashdance was the most popular movie, leg warmers and ripped sweatshirts. So again, that was a long time ago. So this is a really high growth year. And also new annualized premium up 15% from last year as well. And agency building distribution experienced the largest new premium growth. So agents are still able to get in front of the right people. In terms of policy growth, it looked more like, direct to consumer was selling more smaller policies. But again, rising tide is lifting all boats, and there is a lot of opportunity. So here's just a little bit, we track monthly. We have a smaller subset of companies that are giving us information monthly on, premium and policy count and how they're doing in terms of sales. And you can see, again, good trends. So there's opportunity there. It's just how to close that gap, how to recognize and close the gap. And so to close the gap, you want to understand why people buy life insurance. Why do people own? Not surprisingly, to cover burial and other final expenses. And for each of these, you can look and do sort of segment analyses. So for example, Black Americans are more likely to own life insurance to cover burial and other final expenses. And I think Maggie's gonna talk a little bit about that. But also helping replace lost wages or the income of a wage earner, transferring wealth and leaving an inheritance for fully a third of people. So there's a recognition that life insurance can cover a variety of needs, right? Supplementing retirement income, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot of reasons that people own life insurance, and understanding that, helps to sell it. also understanding what some of the objections are. And sometimes, one of the most common objections is that life insurance is too expensive. And I want to share here some research that LIMRA did, where we were looking at implicit reaction time of consumers who were telling us why they didn't want to buy life insurance. And so, we asked them and we had them type in their responses, and we saw how long it took them to choose a particular response. And our hypothesis was the faster you answer, the more strongly you felt about something. And people were most likely to say it's too expensive. But interestingly, they didn't feel strongly about that. And essentially what that means in terms of a sales situation is it's just kind of a common reason that people give, right? Is if they can't think of exactly why, they say it's too expensive. But we also asked people how much they thought insurance cost, right? How much do you think it cost? And not surprisingly, only 1 in 4 had the correct range of costs, right? So we asked them how much did they think it would be to get a 20-year, $250,000 level term life insurance policy. There were some serious overestimations here. So keep in mind here that millennials have a very weak understanding of the cost, as do other groups as well. Again, and I think Maggie's going to talk about some of that. But understand that being able to show that life insurance is not too expensive is necessary, but it's not going to be sufficient, right? Because sometimes it's really about cost, and sometimes it's less about cost, but cost is the convenient excuse when I'm not really sure. And that's why, your job is so important, right? And we know right now that a quarter of consumers who are not currently working with an advisor say they're looking for one. So, right, that's 1 out of 4 adults in the US that is not working with an advisor wants one. And so it's almost, again, people want advice. They want someone to help them. They have inertia, which kind of keeps them from really taking steps. But that's why it's up to us to reach out to them. And so I wanted to end my segment of the presentation by talking about some of the lessons that our research has taught us that may be valuable to you as you're looking to close the gap. I would say 1, customer interest is up. Our sales data is showing that. Our customers are self-reporting that. So the key is to make it easy, right? Also to reach out to existing owners. Existing owners already understand the value of life insurance. They're seeing so many different things in the news. They've seen the impact of the pandemic. And so they're more likely to understand that this is again, a conversation worth having. Leveraging technology and digitization. So the pandemic meant that more financial professionals, agents, others were doing communication with consumers by Zoom, by phone, in many different ways. I think that is going to keep up. Digital expectations are just going to continue to grow. Distribution rose to that challenge. And so I think that is going to stay. Meeting the customer how and when he or she wants is just going to become table stakes. And that's another thing. I'm going to skip to the last one for a second. When I was talking about 25% of the US population not working with an advisor is looking for one, they're really looking now for holistic advice. So someone who can talk to them about all of their needs will, all of their needs, and just being kind of a voice for them is becoming more and more common and more of an expectation. And so how you market yourself matters there. And I did want to conclude with, talking about understanding what messages resonate, because we have done some really interesting research. We had a number of different marketing messages that we tested with different audiences. But the interesting thing is we were using a special behavioral finance kind of experimental methodology where people didn't realize they didn't realize the messages they were being asked about, so that we gave them different messages to evaluate. And then in a separate experiment, we tested those messages. And then we compared what people said they thought was a good message, and then what actually correlated with them buying insurance. So we tracked people before and after they bought. And interestingly, one of the messages that was most compelling to people is the one that they said was least compelling. And so I call that social proof. So when we told consumers that people like them, so if it was a man in his 30s who was married with no kids, the test message was, men who are married in their 30s, the vast majority of them own life insurance. People said, oh no, that's not a compelling message at all. But people who heard that message were actually more likely to buy. So I think it's interesting that social proof works, right? People may say, oh, I'm nothing like anybody else. I'm unique. Just because everyone looks up, I'm not going to look up. Or just because everyone's eating chicken with their hands, I'm an individual. Message is about social proof. What people like you do seem to actually move the needle for all that people want to claim they're individuals. So I thought that was very interesting. And so these are just a couple of things that may help close the gap. But now I wanted to turn the presentation over to Maggie, who's going to talk about one specific demographic group, the opportunities there, and then some tools that Life Happens has that should help, again, close that gap. So thank you all very much.
Thanks so much, Allison. We've had a partnership, Life Happens, with LIMRA for 11 years on this study. I've had the honor to be on it since the beginning. I've shared it over time with NAFA, so I'm happy and excited to be here with you today. And I think the synergy that we have working with LIMRA is linking the numbers and Life Happens with the actions that you can take. So I want to dive a little bit deeper into some of the global numbers that Allison talked about and weave them into marketing materials that you can use to reach out to close the coverage gap. And so with this year's Barometer, we were able to do a deeper dive statistically on the Black community and their attitudes and perceptions on life insurance. And so Allison highlighted that a third of people said that COVID was a wake-up call to purchase life insurance and showed some of the movement in the sales for that. Within the Black community, that number is even higher, 38%. So I think this gives us a great opportunity to open up more conversations about life insurance. On the next slide, when we look at life insurance coverage, I think this is another encouraging statistic. So we have, 56% of Black Americans say they have coverage, and 14% of those say they need more. So there's an awareness there that they actually do need more life insurance. And similar to that, on the next slide, those with no coverage, there's also a third of those that say that they need coverage. So between, as we talk about closing the coverage gap, those with insurance, there's a realization they need more, and even those without, there's a realization that they actually do need it. And the Barometer always talks about attitudes and perceptions. So this is perceived need. And as most of you well know, what people think they need and what they actually need, there's usually a gap there too. So I think there's a great opportunity here with the Black community to help them close that coverage gap. On the next slide, then, we're going to talk a little bit about the appreciation for life insurance. And I really like this statistic, 66% say that a major reason to own life insurance is for burial and final expenses. And that's always at the top of the list each year with the Barometer. But that's well above the general population. The general population, it's just under half that say that's a major reason. So there's really a deep understanding and appreciation within the Black community about what life insurance can do, at least immediately following a death. But from the work we've done with our diversity group, on the next slide, I'm going to show a little bit more about what we've been able to do at Life Happens. So we've worked with our diversity group, and we found that producers have a hunger for resources that help them educate on the broader range of benefits of owning life insurance. And so on the left-hand side is a marketing piece that we developed that goes into final expenses, you know, the myth that it's for final expenses, and really expands on that. And then on the right-hand side, we talk specifically about the living benefits of life insurance. And both of these I see as conversation starters, right? You can see they're short, they're to the point, and this is where the agent or advisor can come in and really fill in the blanks. These are pieces to get the people thinking about life insurance and thinking about it more broadly. And these myths started actually with two NAIFA members that we had on a webinar at Life Happens, Delvin Joyce and Kristen Eskew. And they led a webinar called Improving Life Insurance Coverage for Black Americans, 5 Myths and Misconceptions. And we really worked with those myths and misconceptions to blow them out more and develop resources that could help agents and advisors have these conversations. And on the next slide, social media obviously is a really big way that people are using. It's free for the most part, unless you're advertising, to reach out. And you're not selling on social media, right? You're having conversations. You're getting people to think. You want them to DM you. You want them to follow up. But this life hint that we had here was our top post on Instagram, that life insurance can help create multi-generational wealth, which is really something that the Black community does not know much about. And so after I finish talking, I'm going to put a link in the chat. You can use that link and get a download of the social media graphic and use it on Instagram or Facebook if you'd like, and start that conversation. So on the next slide, we see that while this looks like a negative statistic, I actually think it's a positive. A quarter say a reason for not owning life insurance is they just haven't gotten around to it. To me, that tells me they know they need it. They're procrastinating. And I know agents and advisors are great at helping people move from procrastination to buying the coverage they need. So I really like this statistic. And I like the next one as well on the next slide that talks about a third of Black Americans are looking for help from a financial professional. So between those two statistics, I think there's really a nice opportunity to go out and start conversations and to begin relationships and have those conversations about what life insurance can do beyond burial, beyond final expenses. And again, help start closing the coverage gap, both with those who have it and need more, and those who actually do not have it. And now I'm going to dive a little bit deeper into something that Allison talked about. So on the next slide, the myths surrounding buying life insurance. And at Life Happens, we always talk about this as the true cost, right? It's the cost that people have in their head, what they think life insurance costs, and what it actually does. And on the next slide is highlight of something that Allison talked about, but I think just seeing it blown out here is really illuminating. So when we asked people in the survey for the cost of a 20-year term policy, $250,000 for a healthy 30-year-old, more than half overestimated, not just overestimated, they overestimated the cost by 3 times. And 44% of millennials thought that that policy, which is right around $160, $170, they thought it would cost $1,000 or more. So when I think about that, what commodity do we buy? Things that we buy, food or cell phone or car or even car insurance, do we overestimate the cost by 3, 5, 10 times its cost? So what we really need to do is continue. Every single year we see this statistic, we have to keep educating folks about the true cost of life insurance. And again, at Life Happens, we do that in quite a few different ways. But on the next slide, I'm going to show you a video that's great for social media. Great. So now I'd like to just talk about some of the free tools and resources that we have through Life Happens. Again, we're a nonprofit. We work very closely with NAIFA. NAIFA was one of our founding members. So we're very cognizant of what we can create to help you sell more life insurance and again, close that life insurance gap. So the first thing that I want to talk about are the real life stories that we do. And NAIFA does a really great job of helping you figure out and articulate your why, right? Why are you doing what you do? And I know some NAIFA members, some of you have delivered a death claim, some of you may not have, but we have tools, we have stories for you to use. So whether you have or have not, these stories help underline the why of life insurance. So on the next slide, I'm going to show you one of our real life stories videos.
I love my 2 boys. They're my whole world. They're everything to me. But being a single parent at my age was never a thought of mine. When we started our family, Katie wanted life insurance, but being young and healthy, I didn't think we needed it. Shortly after our second son was born, Katie contracted Ewing sarcoma cancer. We were positive, you're gonna make it. A year and a half after our second son was born, cancer took her life. Although nothing can bring Katie back, the life insurance has afforded us to be able to keep the life that we had before she passed.
So that real life story, as well as our whole library of real life stories, resides on our consumer website, lifehappens.org. You can go there, you can browse through and find stories really to fit just about any demographic. that you need to help tell the story, to help tell the why about life insurance. Another tool that we have on our consumer website is our life insurance needs calculator. Often the most effective way, I've heard this from agents, is to get people to understand their life insurance need through doing their own math. And one person who used this frequently and talked about it is industry icon Marv Feldman, who also led Life Happens for many years. And he would send his clients to Life Happens and have them do their own math to find out what their life insurance need was, right? It's a third-party nonprofit website, so it's not connected to any kind of company or sales follow-up. So he would have them do their own math and then sit down with them and talk about their life insurance needs and go from there. So again, on our consumer site, lifehappens.org/how much. And then on our last slide, I'm very excited that this webinar landed on the day that we just released our Life Insurance Awareness Month resources. So you're among the first to know that our new spokesperson is singer and songwriter and mom, Kelly Rowland. And she does an amazing job of telling consumers directly that they need to get life insurance. Her quote here, I really like, and she also tells them directly in the video that we have for consumers, it's time to get the life insurance coverage you know you need. So we have dozens of Kelly Rowland resources, along with all our our Life Insurance Awareness Month resources that are ready for you. After I finish up, I'll also put a link to Kelly's message to the industry. So she talks specifically to us about why it's important that we get out there and have these conversations and let people know about this. So I have 2 links to put in the chat box. And again, hopefully you have a few resources here to connect the dots between what Allison was talking about with the coverage gap, that there is this huge number of people who need our help, but sometimes that can be really overwhelming. So hopefully the second part has helped maybe narrow down so that you can focus on a smaller demographic and help them get the coverage they need and close that gap. So now I will turn it back over to Elena.
Fantastic. Maggie, Allison, thank you so much for sharing this with us today. I hope everyone was able to gather a lot of really great information. And as you can see, sometimes that nerdy sciencey stuff is really beneficial because it helps us really identify how to have those conversations, how to have courageous conversations with the consumer itself. It does not look like I see too many chatty folks today. I'm not seeing any questions pop up through the chat or through the Q&A. But I do want to remind everyone that the resources are out there. In addition to the recording of this webinar, we'll provide copies of the slides as well. So you'll have access to all that information. And I know, Maggie, you were popping up a couple of, there we go. I see them coming through in the chat.
Yeah, so the first one, that should link directly. It should be a direct download to the social media. The next one is the calculator I talked about. Then Kelly's industry message is at the top of that page. And then the link to the real life story that we watched.
I am making copies of all that as well. Okay, fantastic. Well, we really appreciate it. We appreciate all of your time. In addition to these resources, what's mentioned by Maggie on the Life Happens page, you would also, Allison, do they have access to the Barometer study through Lerma's website?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, perfect. So you'll have access to all the great data, all the things that you need to be successful. And then In addition to that, we at NAFA have had, in partnership with LIMRA and Life Happens, a few coverage gap webinars ourselves. So I will actually do my part to put that in the chat while we're all throwing up some links. But there's access to a few different webinars that we held previously this year, and it'll give you some more tips and tricks just to have those courageous conversations and how to really address that coverage gap with the consumer base itself. So again, on behalf of NAFA and LIMRA and Life Happens, we thank you all so much for your time today. Thanks for sharing the past 45 minutes with us, and we hope you have a fantastic Wednesday. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.